Hey guys, welcome back to Critical Flick. Today I'm reviewing The Stranger, now streaming on Netflix. So The Stranger is a new Australian crime drama film, and it is loosely based on some true events that happened in the past. And the movie features Joel Edgerton and Sean Harris as two individuals that are both hiding a secret. And I do think this movie excels the most in its tension and its atmosphere. The movie, while it may be a little bit of a slow burn, I think does a really good job of building these really nuanced and quiet moments between these two characters. Joel Edgerton plays Mark, who very early on in the film you find out is an undercover cop who's trying to get information from Sean Harris's character. You find out a little bit further along kind of the twists and turns that are there, and there's somewhat of a big reveal towards the third act of the film. Twist isn't really super strong. You kind of see it coming a little bit earlier, but it still does have somewhat of some gut punch moments to it. I do think the performances of both of the actors were phenomenal. Sean Harris, though, really steals the show. I know him mostly from the Mission Impossible movies, but he was also really good in The Green Knight, which I watched recently. And I do think he plays this character that is so unsettling that it almost like captivates you while he's on screen. He does a really good job of that. It's something that he's always done a really good job of, and this movie is definitely not an exception to that. And you're so entranced with his interactions with Joel Edgerton's character because he is someone who is trying to figure out him and kind of get information from him and getting kind of caught up in the allure of this very bizarre individual. So when you see those very quiet moments between these two, it may be very subtle, but the acting is really, really good. When I say quiet moments, this movie does have a lot of scenes that take place with just these two characters with not a ton of dialogue. There's a lot of driving around, some quiet drives, some quiet interactions. And I do think the movie does a good job of making it not too boring when these things are happening. I think it's well shot. I think it's well executed. But I could see how someone might think that this movie is a bit of a slow burn, especially if you're going into it expecting it to be a more traditional undercover cop kind of movie. There's not a lot of action. There's not a lot of violence. Though the violence is implied in this movie revolves around a violent act, and it does have some almost violent emotions from some of the characters, but it isn't like your traditional like shoot 'em up cop film. Atmosphere is phenomenal. The cinematography is really well done. I do think the score is a big standout for this movie because it, like I said, it ratchets up that tension. It builds this swelling of these bizarre sounds and just like this ringing and just it gets in your head and it really puts you in the seat of these characters, these uncomfortable situations they're in. So I think the score is something that really pushes it to another level. The movie has almost like a haunting atmosphere to it. It's an Australian film and it's filmed in Australia, and I know it was done very shortly after or during COVID, so it does have that kind of very condensed feel to it, like a lot of movies that came out during this time with very few characters, some very like open and eerie places. And I do think that is something that makes the movie just a little bit better. Like I said, is that atmosphere, the collaboration of the cinematography, the acting, the score, it all comes together to make a very cohesive and haunting film. So if I were to rate The Stranger, I would give it an 8.5 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. I will say, if you're someone, like I said, who's wanting a more action-packed movie, you may be kind of left feeling unfulfilled. It is quite a slow burn. I believe it's just under 2 hours, but it does feel substantially longer than that at times. But I think it's so well executed that it's worth checking out. And this is kind of embarrassing to say, but I couldn't fully understand everything they were saying. And within the first 10 minutes of the film, I realized I had to watch it with subtitles. So I ended up doing that. And I tend to do that with some of these more quiet, somber movies that come out, these independent films that are really dialogue heavy because I don't want to miss anything they're talking about. So I would actually recommend checking it out with subtitles. And I kind of recommend going into it blind, not knowing the story, not knowing what's happening, because if you don't know kind of the crime behind it, I think some of the twists and turns along the way will be a little more enjoyable and a little more intriguing. So if you checked out The Stranger, let me know what you thought about it. Did you enjoy as much as I did? Did you not enjoy it? I always love to hear everybody's opinions. Leave those comments down below. Remember to like and subscribe, and see you guys next time.